From close to a deal to miles apart, President Trump says he's in no hurry to end the war on Iran. But as U.S. allies like Kuwait and U.S. consumers pay the price, could the pressure to make peace change Washington's approach? And if not, what's the end game for all of us? I'm Andrea Sankey, and this is the Newsmakers. Well, even while President Trump claims a deal is imminent, Washington and Tehran have returned to exchanging fire in the Gulf. Kuwait has faced the latest wrath, with Iran targeting a U.S. airbase on its territory. So since an extended ceasefire seems not to apply, the Strait of Hormuz remains firmly closed, which means crucial lines of our global energy supply chain are crippled. So for how long can this remain the state of play? Here's a look now at an ever more convoluted picture.
Kuwait City in the early hours of Monday morning. Its military says it intercepted hostile missile and drone attacks. The attacks are believed to be part of wider Iranian reprisals at countries that house US bases in the region, following a weekend of US strikes on Iranian military sites. The US has struck several sites in Iran in yet another breach of April's ceasefire. US Central Command said it targeted several Iranian radar command and control locations for drones on several small islands in the Persian Gulf, and that these sites were in response to Iranian actions that included downing a US MQ-1 drone operating in international waters. Iran considers them more than just ceasefire violations.
Violations of the ceasefire are themselves indicative of US misconduct and bad faith, and merely intensifying the existing mistrust, which rightly must always remain in our minds in any interaction with the American side. These US actions are not merely violations of the ceasefire. They constitute an act of aggression and a violation of Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the United Nations Charter. They entitle and authorize us, in line with the right of self-defense, to undertake corresponding defensive measures. Today, we explicitly announced that we targeted the source of the aggression.
The US president posted on Truth Social that Iran really wants to make a deal, one which will be good for the USA. He also took a swing at the Democrats, as well as unnamed Republicans in his own party, whom he accused of negatively chirping criticisms or advice and instructions, saying it made it harder for him to do his job.
As I have said many times, those engaged in diplomacy do not believe the enemy's words or promises. Our standard is the concrete results we must achieve in order to fulfill our commitments in return. And we will not approve any agreement until we are certain that the rights of the Iranian people have been upheld.
While the ceasefire came into effect on April 8, and the US president has made multiple statements that the US and Iran are close to a permanent deal, no formal agreement has been announced. In Tehran, people on the street are skeptical of any deal and, like their leaders, do not trust the US president. And the war drags on. Trump keeps saying a deal is near, but the deal keeps looming just beyond the horizon, always approaching, but never arriving.
And we have to remember this elusive deal actually starts with an agreed memorandum of understanding. That means both parties can finally sit down to negotiate an actual deal to end the war. So when will they actually sit down to negotiate, and where does the war on Iran and the Strait of Hormuz stand now? Joining me now to debate that and more are from Delhi, retired U.S. Army Colonel Liam Collins, from Cairo, Senior Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute for Defense and Security Studies, H.A. Hellier, and from Tehran, Research Fellow at the University of Tehran, Mohammad Eslami. Thank you all so much for being with me. Mohammad Eslami, I'll start with you first. Is there an actual firm MOU in place to pave the way for real negotiations? So, in other words, I mean, has the peace process progressed at all?
I think that the situation right now is very fragile. While the Americans and the Iranian negotiators are trying to solve the problem and find solution for the huge gaps between two countries, and there are right now some hopes for having a kind of memorandum of understanding to not a kind of peace, but somehow ending the war. And after achieving to this memorandum of an understanding, they should continue their negotiations and see if they can agree about some kinds of difficulties, much more difficulties regarding the Iranian nuclear program. So right now, I cannot say that both parts have achieved a memorandum of understanding, because there are some challenges exist. Most important challenge right now is the future of the Strait of Hormuz.
Let me move on to Dr. Hellyer, because if we look then at the latest attacks, even if the Iranian attack on Kuwait was technically repelled, according to Kuwait, it still means airspace is disrupted over the Gulf, and economies that thrive on, tourism and commercial functions, first and foremost the UAE, they can't really return to normal. So how strong is the pressure on Washington to speed up reaching a deal?
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be on your program. I think there's significant pressure because, of course, the entirety of the Gulf didn't want this war in the first place, and now pretty much seems to all there seems to be a new consensus that they want this to end right now. And there were differing points of view in between, but I think the consensus now is pretty clear. Having said that, Washington is moving quite slow. Tehran is moving slowly as well. And you have spoilers, and the most critical spoiler in this regard is the Israeli government, because they've now escalated their invasion and occupation within Lebanon. Netanyahu announced earlier today that he was ordering strikes on southern Beirut. And of course, the Iranians see that, I think, as having been given a green light by Washington, D.C. And you saw the Iranians declare quite strongly earlier today that the tracks had to be kept in unison, i.e., if there's a ceasefire, it's got to be a ceasefire on quote unquote all fronts. And the Israelis don't want a ceasefire. The Israelis are not interested in an MOU or a deal of any sort. When it comes to the Americans and the Iranians, I think both of them do want to have a deal. I think both of them do want to have an MOU. I think the gaps have been narrowed somewhat as compared to, say, a month ago. The most crucial problem there, frankly, is that both sides feel that they've won. Neither side feels like they're in a losing position. And they both want to come out of this looking victorious. And that doesn't make for a very easy negotiation discussion going forward. And again, I reemphasize the Israeli element in this should not be underestimated.
Yeah, it's just it's so confusing to almost anyone that, they're talking about a deal, but they don't even have the basic framework to properly start the negotiations. The MOU isn't firmly established yet. So it's just it's a bizarre contradiction.
I mean, to be fair, I think this is better than where we were a month ago. There is a framework that they are discussing. The initial framework indicates that the strait would be opened, but they know that they're not going to get any agreement on the nuclear file. I mean, look, the JCPOA took, I think, about 18 months to negotiate. They're not going to come to anything that looks remotely like that in the space of a few days.
That's what I mean. I mean, you're talking about 18 months, though. We're talking about, months to come, when originally we were told this would be over in days. Yeah, so it's hard to reconcile. Yeah.
I think I understand, but I think that nobody should have taken seriously any of the rhetoric that was coming out of Washington, D.C. at the beginning of this, that they were going to start a war that was going to end really quickly, They had all of these really fancy war aims that they thought that they could achieve, including regime change and so on. None of this was realistic. It was very early called out as such, but unfortunately, the
Right.
decision-making process in Washington, D.C. has fallen to pieces in
They're
that
still
regard.
saying it will end quickly. However, we've returned right back to both sides firing, active combat in the Gulf. But okay, let me move on to Colonel Collins and ask you this, because President Trump has said he's in, and I'm quoting him, no hurry to finish this war. But people are struggling, not just Americans, but around the world. They're struggling with costs and general insecurity that's really hitting hard. So how is that registering with Americans to say he's not in a hurry?
Is right of the Trump administration and President Trump was to prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon. And he said from the onset, right, it's going to be costly to the American public. It might be costly to others, but for him and the administration, that is worth the cost of having a nuclear armed Iran in the region. So, I mean, this is all too common in wars there's going to be costs of wars that are bared by the countries that are waging war and by third parties that aren't even involved in the war. But unfortunately, that's common with war.
Let me ask you in the meantime, from a military perspective, I mean, how is the United States actually resupplying its bases and its warships, both in the Strait of Hormuz area and in the Gulf itself? How are these troops holding up?
Yeah, I mean, the troops are holding up fine. I mean, that's what they sign up for when they go to war, whether it's Air Force, Army, or Navy, right? They expect that they may be called out to go for an extended period of time, right? The military is able to conduct wartime logistics, whether it's food, fuel, ammunition, those kind of things. That's part of what militaries do, and the U.S. military is the best at doing that around the world. And so the troops are holding up
okay,
fairly well.
Then what about logistically resupplying the infrastructure there?
Yeah, I mean, that's just normal, right? I mean, normal wars, right? It's normal logistics, right? Either by ship, by air, by land. I mean, there's multiple ways to do it depending on where the base is located or where the asset is located. That's pretty normal.
They're managing to get everything in? Because I've seen reports that it's become incredibly difficult to try and do the maintenance necessary on the war vessels that are there, on the bases that need more supplying. That's not what you're hearing?
No, they're able to maintain that. That's what militaries do, and that's what they're able to do. I mean, so there will be times, when something may come to a lower status, and they'll get the asset in there as needed.
Okay. Let me turn to Mohammed again then, because I don't know if you saw the interview on Fox News, but in the same interview with President Trump's daughter-in-law on Fox, he said, we shouldn't have been in Iran. First, he said that rather quickly, kind of rolled over it, but still he said we shouldn't have been in Iran. And he also said we left Iran's military alone because we think they're somewhat moderate. I want to ask you what you think he means by that.
Yes, I saw the interview. It was interesting. Donald Trump understood that this war is a very simple example of failure for the American policy and a failure for the American army. They didn't achieve declared goals regarding Iranians. They didn't achieve any kind of regime change. They didn't achieve any kind of, different point of view regarding the nuclear program. And right now they are in a conflict that they didn't have before the war, which is the future of the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians will not leave the Strait of Hormuz. Of the Strait of Hormuz under the list of the list of OPEC's lists. It doesn't mean that the Iranians will not continue their efforts to have a new framework for the Strait of Hormuz, while right now the Oman government is collaborating with the Iranians to pave the ways and challenges legally in terms of international law to announce this new framework. So I think that right now, Donald Trump knows that this is a failure for the American army, this is a failure for the American foreign policy, and he's trying to go out of this crisis, this global crisis. And this is the fact. Everybody knows that what's going on in the Persian Gulf.
Okay, Dr. Hellier, let me ask you, when President Trump talks about the IRGC as somewhat moderate, could he mean that he sees a potential partner in there that the U.S. could work with if they get the regime change they'd pushed for?
So I'll be honest with you. I find dissecting his comments to be not particularly useful. The problem with this war from the outset is that it's relied on a policy-making enterprise in Washington, D.C. that has really taken a massive beating over the last year and a half. The Trump administration removed huge amounts of expertise from within itself, has relied on very ideological actors within the administration, but also outside of it. And frankly, the White House does not listen to many of its own experts. Had it done so, then I think that they would have realized that one of the first things the Iranians would do would be try to close the Strait of Hormuz, which, by the way, I regard as completely illegal. But it was very expected. I don't think anybody who was engaged in war games in Washington, D.C. over the past 20 years would have missed that. But somehow the Trump administration thought that this would be over very quickly, that the Iranians would not be able to effectively close the strait, that they could do regime change, that it could come off like Venezuela. All of this was really quite preposterous from the point of view of any analyst in D.C. that knew anything about Iran. So when Donald Trump starts talking about relatively moderate or moderate in terms of the army, I suspect, by the way, he's making a distinction between different parts of the security apparatus in Iran itself, and maybe not really speaking about the IRGC. But he makes mistakes in interviews on a regular basis. So we just have to look at how policy is actually being developed. Your guest said that this was about ensuring an Iran without a nuclear weapon. American intelligence made it very clear that there was no imminent threat of a nuclear weapon being constructed in Iran.
Right.
But again, it's not, the Trump administration isn't listening to its own experts, and as a result, you have policies that work out like this.
Yeah, let me ask Colonel Collins, because the reason I actually honed in on those, somewhat moderate elements he was talking about in that interview in the IRGC is because, and Dr. Hellier alluded to it himself there was the argument about the Venezuela model. And it smacked of that slightly, because the Venezuela model meant replacing the people in power with members of that same government that they believed they could work with more easily. So is that potentially what they're looking to do in Iran? We kind of struck the Venezuela model off, but having heard this, it seems like it might still be a potential plan there.
I mean, I don't think there was any belief in the onset that this would be something simple like Venezuela. I mean, obviously a lot more assets and everything were moved there. If you look at it, yeah, regime change was part of one of many different objectives, right? Limiting the threat from the Navy, right? Their missile capability, their nuclear capability. It was one of many capabilities. I don't think there was maybe within the administration expected regime change, but I think there was also probably many others that didn't think that was something that would be easily accomplished.
The president said that there was regime change. The United States president said that there was regime change. I mean, let's not dismiss this, right? Donald Trump himself said we have regime change. You may not like that he said that, but that's what he said.
There's no change in the Iranian government or Iranian policy toward the region. I can say that the new government and the new leadership in Iran is much more hardliners.
Go ahead, Colonel Collins.
Yeah, I was going to say there's been a leadership change, but there has been no regime change. The regime is still one that doesn't care about its population.
He said regime change. I didn't say it.
Runs proxy wars around the world. Runs proxy wars around the world. I'm talking about what the regime in Iran does.
How so?
I said it's one that doesn't really care about their people. It's one that oppresses their people. puts down
Yes, it's a
peaceful
horrible
protests by
regime. That's not the
violence and
point.
killing their citizens.
But that's not what it's about. We're looking at, U.S. strategy as per whom they want running this government, whom they could see as a so-called partner, or at least negotiating partner on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who they would see as a partner in Iran. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know who that would be.
Let me ask you then quickly, Colonel. I'm just curious to know then.
Than I do.
Yeah, we talk about strategy as per the U.S. military and Washington's strategy. We now have these reports saying that the U.S. military is somehow considering merging with the IDF via a technology agreement. And some argue it's actually a complete strategic overhaul, putting the two military operations into one so that they can leverage off each other's resources. What would that mean for the United States? Does that sound like a wise strategy to you, given that there's a lot of acrimony when it comes to now the U.S. position on Israel and how much they cooperate with Netanyahu and the IDF?
Yeah, I mean, Israel's always been a strong partner for the United States, and right, that complicates relationships within the region. I mean, I think it's not going to be as tight of a partnership as you're describing there. I mean, there's going to be cooperation, intelligence cooperation, those kind of things. But a lot of times, Israel's interests diverge from the United States' interest, and so it's even hard to get cooperation between the two. So I wouldn't expect to see, any more significant cooperation than they currently have.
Okay, we'll see what Congress says about that. Mohammed, question then for you. I mean, Iran is now saying, as you know, that Israel's assault on Lebanon is what's causing the major delays to securing any kind of deal. Why has Lebanon become, in that at least analysis, the pivotal issue here? How important is it really that a deal over Lebanon is struck before the U.S. and Iran can sit down properly at any table?
Let me first add something about the previous discussion between the guests. Donald Trump killed so many innocent kids, so many innocent non-military persons in Iran, all over the Iranian cities, not only in the capital city in Tehran, but also in all many different cities around the Iranian territory. And right now, one of the facts on the ground is so many ordinary Iranian people are asking the new government why you are not going to have a nuclear weapon. I don't want to say that the Iranian government is thinking about a nuclear weapon, but this is a request from so many ordinary people. I'm even talking about the so-called reformists in Iran. They are thinking that the only way for the Iranians to have deterrence is a kind of nuclear weapon. And this is the effect of the war of choice that Donald Trump started and sacrificed the future of all the people in the region around the Persian Gulf. And he made a global disaster by not thinking about the realities on the ground. Okay. We can think about what happened after JCPOA. JCPOA was another approach toward non-proliferation treaty and non-proliferation efforts internationally. So anyway.
Yeah. So as far as the nuclear program is concerned, we're looking at the worst kind of blowback possible. I mean, completely counterproductive efforts, you're saying. I'll tell you what, we only have...
Yeah, it is backward.
Well, we only have 2 minutes left, so I just have one final question for Dr. Hellier, because there has been some thought as to what the strategy for the U.S. is going forward, because Iran was not the only thing on the U.S. agenda as far as what it wanted re-foreign policy in the Trump administration. Some are saying there's a strategy here to specifically deflect from failures now in Iran in this war by diverting potentially to Cuba and to Greenland. Do you see those things, those two areas still on the table for the U.S.? I mean, do we really have to keep our eyes that open as to where the U.S. might go next so that the attention is dropped on the Iran war?
I don't know if I'd put it quite like that in terms of, going onto these different files to distract from the Iran war. But definitely the mood that I've seen in DC is that there's an impatience with regards to Iran because the administration wants to move on to the next file. That next file, less being about Greenland. I think an arrangement has been come to when it comes to Greenland. It's more about Cuba, quite frankly. And I think that there's a lot of evidence that suggests that the administration wants to escalate on Cuba, but doesn't really want to do that while it's still trying to wrap up at least this initial MOU in Iran, particularly with the Strait of Hormuz. It's one thing to sort of kick the can down the road when it comes to the discussions around nuclear with regards to the Iranians. That's not something you can do when it comes to the Strait.
Okay.
And I think that it's the Strait of Hormuz that is really going to occupy them going forward. And I have to say, looking at how the Israelis are pummeling Lebanon right now, is going to create more difficulty in getting to that sort of deal. And by the way, it's not that Iran is a good actor in the region; it isn't. But considering what the last couple of years have looked like with regards to particularly Israelis' assault in different parts of the region, it makes it very difficult for the United States to move forward on strengthening its position there.
Dr. Hellier, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank all three of you so much for being with us on this edition of the Newsmakers, and our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.